This is KHPR, the voice of darkness for the intrepid travelers of the left-hand path. I'm Magister Robert Adams, your host, who will be accompanying you on your journey. So get ready, sit back, relax, and prepare to Kefir and remanifest. Welcome to KHPR, the voice of darkness. I'm Magister Robert Adams, your host, and tonight we have with us Adept Clint, who is going to be speaking upon Setian initiation in yoga. Adept Clint, welcome to the show.
Good evening, Magister. How are you this evening?
I'm doing quite fine, and, this is a very interesting topic. As you are well aware, because you've been in the temple for many years, there are many ways that Setians pursue their own initiation. Some use the Nordic traditions, such as in the OTR. Some use the vampiric traditions, such as in the Order of the Vampire. But you are actually taking the path of integrating yoga into your initiation. Now,
yes,
go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that's correct. About 7 years along in my initiation within the Temple of Set, I began looking for a system to open myself up to the higher understandings of what Setian initiation was all about. And, I found my way into a yoga studio, not because of my initiation necessarily, but as a way to manage the stress of a very high pressure occupation that I had. And what I started to realize after a while was not only was yoga working as a way to manage the stress of my work, but things started to reveal themselves to me on a much deeper level regarding my Setian initiation and, my desire to Kefir. And it all of a sudden, it just clicked. It made perfect sense.
Okay, now I have a question for you now. Myself, growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have had people who are into yoga, and it always seems a very right-hand pathed sort of, I really don't want to use the term hippie, but that's where you see it the most. Why would you choose something like yoga, and how were you able to transform it from a seemingly right-hand path discipline to a left-hand path discipline?
Well, that's a very good question, Magister. In my observation of yoga, there are so many different types of practices, and I started out with Bikram yoga, and Bikram is famous for developing the hot yoga practice. And it's a very fixed 26 asana sequence that's done over the course of 90 minutes in a heated room, and it is a very athletic discipline. There's no yoga philosophy discussed in the classroom, although Bikram's book is very philosophical. And so what I saw was a lot of people coming into the practice of, and I'll be specific here, asana practice, which is the practice of the postures, which is only one aspect of the science of yoga. But people were coming to Bikram to get in shape. So one might very easily construe Bikram as being an aerobic exercise class done in a 105-degree heated room. Now, if you go into the more sort of orthodox schools of yoga, yes, it is very right-hand path. Yoga has been, very deeply influenced by the Hindu faith, which incorporates devotion to many of the deities that are famous in the Hindu religion, like Shiva and Krishna and Vishnu and Parvati and Shakti and and Lakshmi, etc. And there are all these different deities that a Hindi would pray to or worship, and their realization of these deities is amplified or intensified through the practice of asana and pranayama, the breathing exercises, and many of the other disciplines that the 8 limbs of Ashtanga Yoga are known for.
Interesting.
Yes.
Now, could you've mentioned I always called it asana, but it's asana.
Asana.
That is one aspect of it. I noticed, like, for instance, downtown in San Francisco, there was a Bikram studio, and I could totally see that being an aerobic exercise because everyone was in their shorts and stripped down to as little clothes as possible, and they were always covered with sweat. But what is it? I mean, I notice the various postures that people do. Is it really just about the postures? You mentioned the asanas were just one aspect of it. What are the other aspects of performing yoga other than bending yourself into crazy positions?
Well, okay, we have to go back to the beginning of what yoga is. And the classical definition of the science of yoga was compiled by the ancient sage Patanjali. Okay, yoga had existed long before the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali ever was written. But Patanjali is the sage of India who took everything that was known about yoga at the time and put it together in what is called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And the sutras are, well, the definition of a sutra is a thread. And the sutras are the threads of thought about the practice or about the complete science of Ashtanga Yoga, which means the 8 limbs of yoga. And there are many disciplines within those 8 limbs that comprise the totality of the science of yoga. So the goal of yoga, as defined by Patanjali, is to realize the self. Okay, and Patanjali defines the self as not being the mind, not being the body, and not being the emotions. So the self is an energy within the human being that is apart from the mundane aspects of a human being, which are the thoughts, the emotions, and the bodily functions. So going back to what you were saying, the sciences of yoga are there to teach the practitioner how to go beyond the mundane aspects of the being and realize this energetic center or self that is associated with the Brahman. Okay, and the Brahman is the all, the infinite wisdom which guides the universe. But the Brahman is not identifiable by a human being. So the next best thing that yoga or Patanjali offers is the Atman, which is the closest identifiable form of the Brahman that one can see while embodied incarnate. And so this is where the sciences go off onto the right-hand path, because now you have yogic devotees who are practicing bhakti yoga, or the practice of devotion towards the Atman, in the interest of becoming related or associated with the Brahman. However, what makes the Yoga Sutras so unique in terms of a religious aspect is that Patanjali never said in the sutras that a belief in the Brahman was required. He only suggested that if one focuses their attention towards the Brahman through the Atman, that one's yogic initiation and thus the self-realization, which the sciences say is possible, would be accelerated. But yoga, as defined by Patanjali, is not a religious practice. It doesn't specify a belief in any of the Hindu deities. And one of the most brilliant interpretations, or the most modern or contemporary interpretations of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali was written by a doctor named Edwin F. Bryant, Bryant, and he's very neutral in his presentation of yoga as being a science and not a religion.
Interesting. So, now correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like in terms that left-hand path people could understand, the Brahman is similar to the God, and the Atman is becoming like a God?
Well, the Atman is an extension of the Brahman, which is identifiable by a human being on the path of yoga. The Atman equates to this energy of the self that is not the mind, not the body, not the emotions. So it's as good as you can get while you're still breathing. It's about the easiest way to call the Atman.
And it's something outside of yourself that you're making a connection with. It sounds
no. Well, the Brahman is exterior to the self, although we might, Hindu philosophers or yogic psychologists might say that we are a part of the Brahman. We just can't identify with it. And so in light of the fact that it's impossible to identify with the Brahman, we've been given the Atman to work with, which is the next best thing, or one that a human being can relate to or identify with or devote themselves to. So it's sort of an intermediary.
Yes, that was, you said it better than I did, actually. But it seems to me to be that the Atman is a way that you're imitating, making a connection to something outside of yourself that you yourself, you aren't there to actually see it, but you're making a connection to something in a way that, is it you believe that they are, or your interpretation of what they are?
Well, I don't buy any of it because I'm a Setian, and so I understand what they're saying. The Atman is a liaison. It is the easiest way that I can put it from the Hindu perspective. That it's the closest thing you can get to God or the Brahman. So they have a monotheistic attitude, which is the Brahman is it. The Brahman is God or Allah or, Jehovah or whatever. The Brahman is the ultimate, but because we're embodied, we're not pure enough to be able to work with or communicate with the Brahman. So we have a lesser aspect through Hindu to work with that we can identify with or communicate with or feel connected to. But like I said, I'm a Setian, and we don't believe in monotheism. We don't accept God. There is no God. it's very simple to not be associated with that. And so what makes, this kind of leads right into a very cool little thing, because yoga is a science and it's not a religion. The practices, the constituents of the science are the disciplines. And so the science of yoga is very transparent. These are disciplines of purification. These are disciplines of empowerment. These are disciplines of awareness that can be overlaid on top of any religious conviction and used as accelerants and amplification to what any human being believes regarding religion. And so what to me is really cool, if I may continue, is that because this is a transparent science of disciplines to awaken and enliven and purify the self, it works beautifully in conjunction with being ascetian, because we don't believe in God. It's even questionable as to whether or not we believe in set from a conventional faith-based perspective. I mean, we don't do that. We accept that there is an energy out there, and this energy is defined by characteristics of the principle of isolate intelligence, the prince of darkness, and so then this leads into a little bit more discussion. But what questions do you have about what I just said?
Well, from a left-hand path perspective, as you said, we talk about Set as a god, but we do not worship Set in the way that other religions worship their god. We do not bow down before our god. It is a entity that teaches us self-transformation, which it sounds like from what you're saying, you're using yoga to self-transform yourself by your own actions, not by the actions of a god tapping you on the head and saying, okay, I'm going to give you something extra here.
Very correct.
So with there being so much right-hand path connection with yoga, I think maybe we need to go into a bit of explanation about did I say left-hand path? I meant right-hand path if I did. So much right-hand path information.
Yes.
Given on yoga and associated with yoga. Let's talk a little bit about, from the left-hand path, how you reinterpret and apply the various principles of yoga. As you said, the Brahman is something that to people into yoga, they can't touch, they can't understand. So they have the Atman, which relates to the Brahman in some way, and I suppose in their interpretation. How do you use, or how do you approach, I should say, from a left-hand path standpoint, and integrate that into your left-hand path initiation in the best way you can come up with? I know you've touched on this already, but I'm trying to sort of focus this down a bit.
Well, okay, let's consider what we're looking at accomplishing when we become first-degree initiates. Many people come from a myriad of magical backgrounds, and are energetically aware, that there are energies beyond the immediate, perhaps even beyond the surface of the earth that we connect with or resonate with. And as a first degree initiate or coming into the temple, we learn about Set, and we learn about the transformational aspect of what this God represents. We learn about, Set as being the God of separation. And then we have to say, well, separate a whole conversation about the cosmic whole or the collective consciousness of the universe, but it doesn't seem like a valuable use of the time that we have, rather than what inside of ourselves do we wish to become separated from, or how would we use this power of the God of separation. And what we seek, at least in my understanding, to disassociate ourselves from is the lesser self, or the mundane aspect or aspects of human existence, which is, a life based on emotions and reactions or responses to external stimulus, is illustrated in Black Magic by Absissamus Aquino. And then we start to get an idea of the gift of isolate intelligence. Well, isolated from what? Well, it kind of comes back to the mundane aspects of the average human life, who lives, what is written as an accidental existence, always, appealing to something outside of themselves as being more powerful to make things manifest in either his or her life that, makes them more comfortable, or gives them more money, or gets them more material items, or something like that. But the depth of, the earliest part of Setian transformation is to become disassociated from this, what I'll call lesser self, and the life that this lesser self is accustomed to living on an accidental basis, with an appeal towards some entity external to the self that is perceived as being benevolent and generous, and help me get this and help me get that, and inverting that perspective, creating an inversion of perspective to empowering the self, and starting to expand into the ability to create greater black magical workings to change the essence of who one is, to be more resonant with, higher states of living, which may yield greater finances, greater materialism, comforts. But that isn't the purpose of magic. It's to create changes in the objective and subjective universes, not for material gains necessarily, but to achieve higher states of being. So coming into the temple as an initiate and moving through into adepthood, we learn how to let go of this neediness or dependency on an external power source to give us stuff, and instead we learn how to make stuff happen that benefits ourselves. But the obstacle that gets in the way of these early magical practices of not only transformation and awakening, but the powers to be able to make things manifest in our subjective and objective universe, is all of the conditioning that we've been exposed to and have become structuralized or ingrained in our system. These are the saboteurs of our magic. These legacies from our parents and society and schools and teachers and other types of religion. So we need to find a way to clear out the clutter from the closet that gets in the way of realizing the greatness of who we are as isolate beings, apart from the mundane aspects of society, and also going further into what many people interpret as the cosmic whole.
Yeah, and I can understand that completely. I know people who like to work with the satanic paradigm, often, if they are raised Catholic, they like to do the Black Mass. And I know one person in particular who was participating in the Black Mass, and it came to the part where they rip apart the Bible into a cauldron, and then they're supposed to basically piss on the Bible. And it was like, when it came time to piss on the Bible, she couldn't do it, not because of the fact that she didn't want other people to see her actually urinating upon the Bible, but it was just one of those things that was a little too hard for her to do, to all the baggage she had collected from that religion. And, eventually she was able to do it and overcome that. And it was sort of a moment of enlightenment for her. She had overcome her past, and she was able to, instead of staying in stasis, she was able to move forward into the future and transform herself, which ultimately, within the Temple of Set, self-transformation is what we are looking to do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, a lot of people, and we were kind of talking about this lately, but I'm going to relate it to this. A lot of people see yoga as a healing, and it cleanses your body and such. And I have heard some really bizarre things over the years, which may or may not have connections with yoga or Hinduism, but like that Mahatma Gandhi gave himself 2 enemas a day to cleanse his mind and body. I'm not going to ask you whether or not you do that, but I have noticed, and we were talking about this, that since you have been involved with yoga, your health has become much better. And you've lost a lot of weight. You actually look younger. You are more vibrant. Yoga is not like jogging 5 miles a day, though.
No.
So, I mean...
No.
I mean, the changes you've undergone in the past couple of years have been rather remarkable. And, I mean, I assume you would relate the side benefit of self-healing as a way of transforming yourself. I mean, there are people who are drug addicts or alcoholics. And I have heard of people who have gotten into yoga and it has stopped their craving for the drugs or the alcohol. And while there are lots of people who, look at the left-hand path as, indulgence instead of abstinence, and they read that and they think, let's party until we're halfway dead. But, we don't want to end up like Amy Winehouse. We also don't want to end up like Keith Richards, who keeps doing it and is still alive.
Well, he can afford the blood transfusions.
That is true. But you and I, at the moment, we can't afford the blood transfusions. And, why do something super destructive to your body? I mean, in getting involved with yoga, have you found that I don't want to say addictions, because, people say, oh, well, you're addicted to eating, you're addicted to this. And it's like, every one of us is an addict. We're all addicted to air. Mm-hmm. If you're not addicted to air, stop breathing for 20 minutes and see what happens. You die.
Well, it actually only takes 8 minutes to cause cerebral death.
Yes, but you have to have the time leading up to that to make you pass out.
Yeah.
To lead to the cerebral death.
Yes.
So,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was waiting for you, and I was going to fill in time. So,
well, first, I just want to go back to what you were saying about the purification and some of the absolutely ridiculous practices called the Kriyas. Okay? There are many cleansing things that the practice of yoga has to offer. I mean, it goes from self-induced vomiting to clean out the stomach, and then you can swallow gauze to further clean out the stomach, and you can run a catheter through your nasal passage to clean out your sinuses and retrieve it through the back of the mouth. And I mean, and the enemas, well, actually, they in more advanced teacher trainings, you learn how to control the sphincter muscles of the anus and actually withdraw the rectum from the body so that you can clean it and then pack it back in there. And then, you know, lots of yogis hold their rectums open while standing in the Ganges River, and through abdominal contractions suck water up into the colon to clean out. You know, it goes on for a while as far as the kriyas are concerned. A really devout yogi is all about purification of the body, because the body is a dirty, disgusting thing that they happen to be stuck in. And so all of these acts of cleaning are to remove all of the physical and energetic impurities from the body, so that the journey towards the ultimate goal of yoga, which is self-realization, is not obstructed, you know, by chemical deposits or chemical toxicity or energetic toxicity, and also to heighten the senses. You know, so there's the tongue scraping and, you know, all of the oral hygiene practices and all of that. So that's why, you know, they're interesting, but it's nothing that I practice.
If I could interrupt you for a moment, you cut out after the "that's why." So could you repeat that again?
If I understand where I cut out, you know, the reason why all of these cleaning practices are put into place in yoga is to purify the self and remove as much of the chemical and energetic obstruction to the realization of the self as humanly possible. So a very devout yogi is fastidious about self-cleanliness.
Excellent. A couple of things. First off, just so everyone is aware, we are actually recording this on a Skype conference between the United States and Central America, so there may be a little bit of cutting out that occurs, and I apologize for that. But also, your story about the enema reminded me of a story that someone told me once about a yoga class where a woman was showing how you can cleanse your body when you are proficient in the art of yoga. And she basically sort of hiked up her dress a little bit, or her skirt, and she squatted down into this very large bowl of water and like waited a few seconds and then stood back up and showed that she had emptied the bowl.
Yes.
And to me, it was sort of like, well, we are the Temple of Set. We can get a little bit odd. But it sort of reminded me of the stories of the women picking up quarters with certain parts of their bodies down in Mexico. This was something that was kind of surprising that the human body could do. And I thought that was very similar to what you were describing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you know, understand that there are abdominal exercises that are used to stimulate peristalsis in the small and large intestine. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it takes a lot of practice and skill to be able to move or work with the abdominal muscles in such a way that does that. But what you're describing is one of the kriyas, which is the cleaning of the colon. So, you know, she's able to relax her anus and then contract the muscles in her abdomen to create a vacuum in the colon to suck the water up into her colon or large intestine, so that it can be rinsed out. You have impacted feces in the colon. You have break-offs of the mucous membrane that gets stuck in there, and that's just one of the purification techniques that the deeper sciences of yoga will teach you. It's it's no big deal. It's just nothing I spend a lot of time with.
Well, and that can be a good thing.
Yeah.
So overall, now you have taken a right-hand path version of self-initiation, and you have been able to repurpose it for left-hand path initiation.
Yes.
If you had other people that you were talking to and you wanted to explain to them how to do something like this, not just yoga, but there are several other right-hand path things that people have repurposed. I know we had one initiate that traveled to India and was studying the Agorai there, and he sort of repurposed their right-hand path look at how they operate into a left-hand path standpoint. How would you suggest to people to repurpose a right-hand path method of self-transformation into a true left-hand path version of self-transformation?
Interesting. Well, I'd back up just over what you were saying one more time and reiterate that yoga is a science. It's nothing else. It's a science of disciplines to realize the self. And then it becomes right-hand path when the self is defined by terms of a religion, particularly Hindu. So the yoga is a science and it's neutral. Okay, so it can be used for anything. So in a left-hand path paradigm, what I would say is that in order to understand what the gift of Set is, isolate intelligence, one really has to know who they are, what their obstructions are in the form of a fragmented sense of self, as outlined in P.D. Ouspensky's Psychology of Man's Possible Evolution. What behaviors or conditioned manners of existence are deeply in play within the person that keeps them from realizing what the gift of Set is, and also what it means to be able to execute greater black magical working. These are two very, very important things as far as knowing who one is, or knowing what the self is. I wrote about this once within the temples community about fetters and these fragmented aspects of who we are, different little personalities that form the total package of a person's personality. So if I use a greater black magical working as an example, say we want to do a GBM working, and
we get all set up in the chamber and everything, and we know what our will is, because... If I can interrupt you for a second, just so everyone is aware, GBM is Greater Black Magic.
Yes.
Okay, continue.
Excellent. Thank you. We work with the will as Setians and what our will is, and we work on knowing what our will is, or coming to know what our will is. But in the beginning, what we aren't often aware of is how many other little wills are in there in the form of differentiated or fragmented personality. So when we go into the ritual chamber to do a greater black magical working and project our will through the subjective universe and out into the objective, some of these little critters go along for the ride, and they have their own wills too, which are not necessarily congruent with the greater will that we hope to be projecting. And so what happens is, in the beginning or in the earliest stages of our greater black magical practices, we get sabotaged. You know, our workings may yield a desired result, but it also brings back a bunch of things that could go anywhere from annoying to catastrophic. And so down through the outer layer of, let's say, call it personal mud, and work our way down to the purer aspects of who we are, and we see how these conditioned personalities and rebels and everything influence the energy that we project. So yoga, getting back to the purification, through the practice of asana, pranayama, and meditation, we become much quieter inside. The emotionality, the energy, anxiety, frustrations, anger, any of the things that have made our lives complex because of being run by the lesser self, becomes less of an influence the deeper that we go into our practice. And the deeper we go into our practice, the more we get to know our essence, which we would call the black flame. And we also get to understand ourselves as, isolate beings, or a source of isolate intelligence that is not a part of the collective whole of humanity or the universe or the cosmos. And so the easiest way to sum this skill up is detachment. And yoga talks a lot about detachment. I'm not this. Well, I'm not my thoughts, and I'm not my emotions, and I'm not my body. I am something greater than all three of these things. However, I'm stuck in this thing. So, I might as well start working with it in the best way I possibly can to disempower the influence of the mind, body, and the emotions, so that I can become or experience Kepher. I can come into being, and coming to being to me is being able to walk through these lesser components of being in the realization of the greatness of who I am. And in doing so, because I do a rigorous asana practice, yes, my body is much more fit. I have greater range of motion. I have a lot more control over my emotions, my intellect, my physical functions, as a result of the discipline that I have continued to employ in my practice. And the same kind of disciplines are necessary to evolve within the temple. It just isn't presented quite the same way. I mean, I see yoga and seti and initiation as being extremely congruent and parallel, because both are looking to accomplish similar things. It's only when we start to look at yoga as a Hindu practice that we see it goes to the right-hand path. But because seti and initiation is so unique and so entirely self-centered, yoga can do nothing but accelerate the process and deepen it and empower it further.
Well, I was going to ask you if there was anything else you needed to wrap this up, but I think actually that did the best job I can imagine.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Adept Cap, I would like to thank you for being on the show tonight. I think everyone is going to get a new perspective on yoga from a Setian perspective, and I hope they've learned a lot from this. And,
Yes.
And we will be back the next show. We are working on this right now. We will be bringing back the illustrious, the terrifying Magister Mark. Magister.
Oh, I'm scared already. No.
The Magister Mark Luskin to talk about the Order of the Trapezoid with me. And this is going to be one that I think you're all going to want to listen to, because we've been working on this for a while, and I finally have him nailed down to an upside-down cross to be on the show for this.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Magister, this has been wonderful.
Well, I would like to thank you all for listening. Thank you, Adept Cap, and may you all Kefir and remanifest. You've been listening to KHPR, the Voice of Darkness. If you have any questions or comments, you can email them to us at khpr@kefir.org. Thank you for listening, and we hope that we've been able to bring about some change for you.
I'm fucking Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of fucking Darkness. Evil, what's fucking evil?
There can be only one Prince of Darkness.
And that would be me,
Robert Adams.